The morning sun slowly crept through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Kate Middleton sat quietly in her favorite green velvet chair. She had woken up early as she always did, expecting this Tuesday to be just like any other peaceful day with her family. The children were still sleeping upstairs, and William had gone for his morning run around the palace gardens. Everything felt normal and safe in their private world. Kate held her warm cup of Earl Grey tea in both hands, watching the steam rise gently into the cool morning air. She loved these quiet moments before the day began, when she could simply be herself without the weight of royal duties pressing down on her shoulders. The palace felt calm and peaceful, with only the soft sounds of birds singing outside and the distant footsteps of staff beginning their daily work. Then everything changed in a single moment. Mrs. Henderson, their trusted private secretary, knocked softly on the door and entered with a serious expression on her face. She carried an official envelope with the royal seal, the kind that usually brought news of important state matters. Kate noticed immediately that something was different about the way Mrs. Henderson moved, more careful and gentle than usual. "Your Royal Highness," Mrs. Henderson said quietly, "this arrived by special courier this morning. It requires immediate attention." She placed the heavy cream envelope on the small table beside Kate's chair and stepped back respectfully. Kate could see her own name written in formal script across the front, along with several official stamps that meant this was no ordinary correspondence. Kate set down her teacup with slightly trembling hands. Something deep in her heart told her that whatever was inside this envelope would change everything. She had learned over the years that official letters rarely brought good news, especially ones that arrived so early in the morning with such urgency. Her fingers moved slowly along the edge of the envelope, hesitating before breaking the wax seal. As she unfolded the thick paper inside, Kate's eyes quickly scanned the formal language and official letterhead. The words seemed to blur together at first, but then certain phrases jumped out at her like sharp knives. Urgent diplomatic mission. Immediate deployment. Undetermined duration. High security classification. Each phrase hit her heart like a physical blow. The letter explained that Prince William had been personally selected by the government for a critical peacekeeping mission in a troubled region of Eastern Europe. The situation there had become dangerous and unstable, requiring someone with his unique diplomatic skills and military background. The mission was classified as highly sensitive, meaning there could be no public announcements or media coverage. Most frightening of all, there was no clear timeline for when he would return home. Kate read the letter 3 times, hoping that somehow the words would change, or that she had misunderstood their meaning. But each reading only made the reality more clear and more painful. Her husband, the father of her children, the love of her life, would soon be leaving for a dangerous place far from home. And nobody could tell her when she would see him again. Her hands began to shake as the full weight of the situation settled over her like a heavy blanket. This was not like his previous royal tours or official visits, which were carefully planned with clear schedules and regular communication. This was something entirely different, something that carried real risks and unknown challenges. The formal language of the letter could not hide the dangerous nature of what William would be facing. Kate stood up slowly from her chair and walked to the large window overlooking the palace gardens. She could see William in the distance, finishing his morning run, completely unaware that their lives were about to change forever. He looked strong and confident as he jogged along the familiar paths, and her heart ached, knowing that soon she would only be able to see him in her memories. The peaceful morning she had been enjoying just minutes before now felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. In the space of reading one letter, Kate had been transformed from a content wife and mother into someone who would have to find the strength to say goodbye to her husband and help her children understand why their father had to go away. William returned from his morning run with a bright smile on his face, his cheeks red from the cool morning air and exercise. He bounded up the stairs to their private apartment, calling out cheerfully to Kate as he always did. But when he entered their sitting room, he immediately noticed that something had changed. Kate was standing by the window with her back to him, her shoulders tense and her usual morning brightness nowhere to be seen. "Kate, "What's wrong?" William asked, his voice instantly filled with concern. He could read her moods better than anyone else in the world, and he knew immediately that something serious had happened. She turned around slowly, and he saw tears glistening in her eyes that she was trying hard not to let fall. In her hand, she held the official letter that would change their lives. Without saying a word, Kate walked over and handed him the envelope. William's expression grew serious as he recognized the government seal and the formal markings that indicated this was no ordinary correspondence. His military training had taught him to prepare for difficult news, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to read about his own future. As William read the letter, Kate watched his face change from confusion to understanding to a deep sadness that matched her own. She saw the exact moment when the reality hit him, when his shoulders sagged slightly under the invisible weight of duty that had been placed upon them once again. He read the letter twice, just as she had done, hoping somehow that the words would be different the second time. "How long do we have?" William asked quietly, though he already knew the answer would not be what he wanted to hear. Kate told him that according to the letter, he would need to leave within the week. There would be briefings, preparations, and arrangements that needed to be made quickly and quietly. The secrecy of the mission meant that even their closest family members could not know the full details of where he was going or why. They sat down together on their comfortable sofa, the same place where they had shared so many happy moments and important conversations over the years. Now it felt like they were sitting in a completely different room, in a completely different life. The familiar surroundings that had always brought them comfort now seemed to mock them with reminders of the normal life they were about to lose. William took Kate's hands in his own, feeling how cold they had become since reading the devastating news. "I wish I could say no," he told her honestly. "I wish I could just tear up this letter and pretend it never came. But you know I can't do that. This is bigger than what we want. People are depending on me to help bring peace to a very dangerous situation." Kate nodded because she understood, even though understanding did not make the pain any less sharp. She had known when she married into the royal family that duty would sometimes demand terrible sacrifices from both of them. She had prepared herself for many things, but she had never imagined having to face the possibility of her husband going into real danger with no promise of when he would return. "I'm scared," Kate admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It was something she rarely allowed herself to say out loud, but in this moment of crisis, she needed to be completely honest with the man she loved. William pulled her closer to him, and they held each other tightly as the weight of royal responsibility settled over them like a heavy storm cloud. They talked for hours about duty, about service, about the promises they had made to their country and their people. But underneath all the noble words and royal obligations was the simple, heartbreaking truth that a husband and wife were about to be torn apart by forces beyond their control. The afternoon sun filled the family playroom with golden light as George, Charlotte, and Louis played together on the soft carpet. George was building an elaborate castle with his wooden blocks, while Charlotte was reading a story to her favorite stuffed animals. Little Louis was crawling around the room, giggling as he chased after a colorful ball that rolled just out of his reach. The scene was so perfectly normal and happy that it made what William and Kate had to do even more difficult. Kate and William stood in the doorway for a few moments, watching their children play without a care in the world. Both parents felt their hearts breaking as they realized they were about to shatter this peaceful innocence with news that would confuse and frighten their little ones. They had spent the entire afternoon trying to find the right words, but how do you explain to children that their father has to go away to a dangerous place, and nobody knows when he will come home? "Children," William called softly, "can you come sit with Mommy and Daddy for a moment? We need to talk to you about something important." The three children looked up from their games with curiosity rather than concern. They were used to their parents having serious conversations with them about royal duties and responsibilities, so they gathered around without any sense of the tragedy that was about to unfold. George, being the oldest at 10 years old, sensed immediately that this conversation was different from their usual family talks. He could see something sad, and worried in both his parents' faces that he had never noticed before. Charlotte, always intuitive for her 8 years, moved closer to her mother and took Kate's hand instinctively. Baby Louis, at only 4 years old, climbed onto William's lap with complete trust and innocence. William cleared his throat and tried to keep his voice steady and calm. "I have to go away for work," he began, choosing each word very carefully. "The government has asked me to help with something very important in another country. It's a big responsibility, and I'm the only person who can do this particular job." He paused, seeing the confusion beginning to cloud his children's faces. "But Daddy," Charlotte interrupted, her voice small and worried, "you go away for work all the time. Why does this feel different?" Her question pierced straight to the heart of the matter with the clarity that only children possess. Kate felt tears threatening to spill from her eyes as she realized that Charlotte had already sensed the gravity of the situation. William hugged Louis closer to his chest and reached out to touch Charlotte's cheek gently. "This time is different, my darling, because I'll be gone for longer than usual. I won't be able to call you every day like I do when I travel for normal royal duties, and I'm not sure exactly when I'll be able to come home." His voice cracked slightly on the last words, despite all his efforts to remain strong for his children. George, trying to be brave like the future king he would someday become, asked quietly, "Is it dangerous where you're going, Papa?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud, because William could not lie to his son, but also could not tell him the full truth about the risks he would be facing. "There are some challenges," William answered honestly, "but I have excellent training, and there will be many people there to help keep me safe. What I need from all of you is to be brave and take care of each other and money while I'm away." He looked at each of his children in turn, trying to memorize their faces and burn this moment into his memory forever. Louis, not fully understanding what was happening but sensing the sadness around him, started to cry. His little arms wrapped tightly around William's neck, as if he could keep his father from leaving just by holding on tight enough. "No go, Daddy," he whispered through his tears. "Stay home with Louis." The sight of their baby brother crying made Charlotte and George start to cry too, and soon the entire family was holding each other in a tearful embrace. Kate felt like her heart was being torn in half as she watched her children grapple with news that even adults would struggle to accept. She knew that this moment would be burned into all their memories forever, the moment when their safe and happy world suddenly became uncertain and frightening. William promised to write letters and send pictures whenever possible. He told them stories of brave knights who went on important quests, but always found their way home to the people they loved. But nothing he said could take away the fear and sadness that had settled over their children like a cold shadow. The evening air was soft and gentle as Kate prepared what she knew would be their last dinner together for a very long time. She had spent the afternoon in the palace kitchen, working alongside the chef to create all of William's favorite dishes. The dining room had been set with their most cherished china, the same pattern they had used for their first dinner as newlyweds. Candles flickered softly on the table, casting dancing shadows on the walls and creating an atmosphere of intimate warmth. William had just finished tucking the children into bed, a process that had taken much longer than usual. Each child had wanted extra stories, extra hugs, and extra promises that their father would return safely. He had sat with Louis until the little boy finally fell asleep, his small hand clutching a photograph of the whole family that William had placed beside his pillow. George and Charlotte had been braver, but William could see the worry in their eyes even as they tried to be strong for their younger brother. When William finally came downstairs, he found Kate standing by the large window in their private dining room, looking out at the gardens where they had spent so many happy hours with their children. She had changed into the blue dress that he had always said made her eyes look like sapphires, and her hair was styled in the simple way that he loved best. She looked beautiful, but he could see the sadness that she was trying so hard to hide behind her brave smile. "Everything smells wonderful," William said softly as he joined her by the window. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the last light of day fade into purple twilight. Both of them were trying to memorize this moment, to capture it perfectly in their hearts so they could return to it during the difficult days ahead. The familiar view of their garden had never seemed more precious or more beautiful. They sat down to dinner and tried to talk about normal things. Kate told him about the book she was reading and her plans for a new charity project. William shared funny stories from his recent royal engagements and talked about improvements he wanted to make to the palace gardens when he returned. But underneath their casual conversation, both of them were acutely aware that this was their farewell dinner, and that knowledge colored every word they spoke. Kate had prepared roasted lamb with rosemary, William's absolute favorite meal, along with all the side dishes he loved most. They ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but each moment they had together. William complimented every dish and asked for seconds, not because he was particularly hungry, but because he wanted to make this evening last as long as possible. Kate watched him eat with a mixture of love and heartbreak, wondering when she would see him enjoy her cooking again. After dinner, they moved to their private sitting room, the cozy space where they spent most of their quiet evenings together. Kate had lit a fire in the fireplace, and the room was filled with warm, flickering light. They sat together on their favorite sofa, Kate curled up against William's side with her head on his shoulder. The position was so natural and familiar that it seemed impossible to imagine a time when they would not be able to hold each other like this. They talked about their early days together, remembering their university years and their courtship. William reminded Kate of their first official royal engagement together and how nervous she had been. Kate laughed as she recalled how William had spilled tea on his shirt right before meeting the Queen's most important advisors. These happy memories felt like precious treasures that they were carefully placing in a special box to keep safe during their separation. As the evening grew later, they both became quieter, more reluctant to break the peaceful silence that surrounded them. Kate traced gentle patterns on William's chest while he played with her hair, both of them storing up these small, intimate moments. They talked about practical things too, how Kate would handle certain royal duties alone, how they would manage the children's questions, how they would stay connected despite the distance and secrecy. "I'll dream about tonight," William whispered as the clock struck midnight. "When things get difficult, I'll close my eyes and remember exactly how you look right now, sitting here in the firelight." Kate lifted her head to look at him, seeing her own love and sorrow reflected in his eyes. They both knew that in just a few hours, this perfect evening would become just a memory. But it would be a memory they would both treasure forever. Dawn broke too early and too bright over Kensington Palace, as if the sun itself was mocking the sadness that filled the royal residence. Kate had barely slept, spending most of the night watching William as he dozed fitfully beside her. Every few minutes she had reached out to touch his hand or his face, needing to reassure herself that he was still there, still real, still hers for just a few more precious hours. William had been awake since 4 in the morning, though he had tried to lie still so as not to wake Kate. His mind was racing with thoughts of the mission ahead, the dangers he might face, and most painfully, the family he was leaving behind. He had memorized the sound of Kate's breathing, the way she looked peaceful in sleep, the soft warmth of her body next to his. These details would have to sustain him through whatever lay ahead. By 5:30, they both gave up pretending to sleep. William rose quietly and walked to their bedroom window, looking out at the palace gardens that were just beginning to catch the first light of day. Kate joined him there, slipping her arms around his waist from behind and pressing her cheek against his strong back. They stood like that for a long time, neither speaking, both trying to make this moment last forever. "I should get ready," William finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Kate nodded against his back, but neither of them moved. Getting ready would make his departure real, and both of them wanted to stay in this quiet bubble of togetherness for as long as possible. But eventually, duty called louder than their hearts, and William gently disentangled himself from Kate's embrace. Kate watched as William put on his traveling clothes, a simple dark suit that would help him blend in during his journey. She had laid out his clothes the night before, choosing each item with care, including the cufflinks she had given him for their 5th wedding anniversary. As he dressed, she noticed how he moved with the controlled precision of someone preparing for battle, each action deliberate and focused. William packed his single-aloud suitcase with the efficiency of his military training. Kate sat on their bed, watching him fold shirts and organize his few personal belongings. She had prepared a small package for him the night before. A locket with tiny photographs of her and the children, a handwritten letter to be opened only in case of emergency, and a small bottle of her perfume, so he could remember her scent when homesickness became too much to bear. "Kate," William said softly as he closed his suitcase, "I need you to know something. No matter what happens, no matter how long I'm gone, you are the most important thing in my world. You and the children are what will bring me home." His voice was steady, but Kate could see the tears he was fighting to keep from falling. She stood up and walked to their dresser, opening the top drawer to retrieve something she had been saving for this moment. It was a simple silver chain with a small pendant that bore their family crest. "I want you to wear this," she said, fastening it around his neck with trembling fingers. "It's been blessed by the Archbishop, and it will remind you that you carry all of our love with you wherever you go." The palace was still quiet as they made their way downstairs to the entrance hall, where William's security detail was waiting. Kate had chosen to wear the blue dress from the night before, wanting William's last image of her to be connected to their beautiful final evening together. Her hair was simply styled, and she wore the pearl earrings he had given her on their wedding day. In the entrance hall, William's team waited respectfully at a distance, giving the royal couple these final private moments. Kate could see the sympathy in their faces, knowing that they too understood the sacrifice that was being asked of this family. Some of these men had families of their own, and they knew exactly what William was going through. William and Kate stood facing each other in the same hall where they had posed for so many happy family photographs over the years. The morning light streaming through the tall windows cast long shadows on the marble floor, and Kate thought about how empty this space would feel without William's presence filling it. He reached out and took both of her hands in his, holding them tightly as if he could transfer some of his strength to her through touch alone. "Take care of yourself," he whispered. "Take care of our children. And remember that every single day, no matter where I am or what I'm doing, I will be thinking of you and counting the moments until I can come home." Kate nodded, not trusting herself to speak without breaking down completely. She had promised herself that she would be strong for this goodbye, that she would send him off with courage rather than tears. The entrance hall of Kensington Palace had never felt so vast and empty as it did in that moment when William and Kate stood facing each other for what they both knew would be their final goodbye. The morning light streaming through the tall windows seemed too bright, too cheerful for such a heartbreaking moment. Kate could hear the distant sounds of London waking up outside the palace walls, people beginning their normal day while her world was about to be torn apart. William looked into Kate's eyes and saw his own pain reflected there, mixed with a love so deep and strong that it took his breath away. She was trying so hard to be brave for him, to send him off with strength instead of tears, but he could see the tremendous effort it was costing her. Her hands were cold in his, and he could feel the slight trembling that she was trying so hard to control. "I love you," William said simply, the words carrying the weight of everything he could not say. Those 3 words had to contain all his promises, all his hopes, all his desperate need to return to her safely. Kate nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears that she refused to let fall. She had promised herself that his last image of her would be strong and confident, not broken and weeping. They moved toward each other at the same moment, as if drawn by an invisible force stronger than their individual wills. Their embrace was desperate and tender, fierce and gentle all at once. Kate buried her face in William's shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent and trying to memorize the feeling of his arms around her. William held her as if he could pour all his love into her through touch alone, as if he could leave her with enough of his presence to sustain her through the dark days ahead. Time seemed to stop as they held each other in the quiet hall. Kate could feel William's heart beating against her chest, strong and steady, and she tried to memorize that rhythm so she could recall it in the lonely nights to come. William pressed his face into her hair, storing up the silk-soft feel of it and the sweet scent that was uniquely hers. Neither of them wanted to be the first to let go, because letting go would make this separation real and final. When they finally, reluctantly, stepped apart, Kate placed her hand flat against William's chest, right over his heart. "This stays with me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And this," she touched her own heart, "goes with you." It was a promise and a declaration and a prayer all wrapped into one simple gesture. William covered her hand with his own, feeling the warmth of her palm through his shirt. The security team waited patiently near the entrance, understanding that this moment was sacred and not to be rushed. Kate noticed their respectful distance and felt grateful for their kindness. Even in the midst of official duty, they recognized that they were witnessing something deeply personal and precious. Their quiet presence was a reminder that soon William would be surrounded by strangers in a foreign place, far from everyone who truly knew and loved him. William reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I almost forgot," he said with a sad smile. "This is for you to open tonight, after the children are asleep. It's something to remind you that part of me stays here with you always." Kate took the package with trembling hands, feeling how light it was and wondering what precious thing he had chosen to leave with her. Kate had her own surprise. From her small purse, she drew out a folded piece of paper. "This is a letter," she explained quietly. "But don't read it now. Save it for when you need to remember home, when you need to hear my voice in your head." William tucked the letter carefully into his inside jacket pocket, right next to his heart, where it would stay safe and close during his journey. The head of security cleared his throat gently, a respectful but necessary reminder that time was running short. William and Kate both knew that this moment, as precious as it was, could not last forever. Duty was calling, and duty had to be answered, no matter how much it hurt to do so. They looked into each other's eyes one more time, trying to say everything that words could never express. "Come back to me," Kate whispered, finally allowing one tear to escape and roll down her cheek. William reached up and gently wiped it away with his thumb, his own eyes bright with moisture that he was fighting to control. "Always," he promised. "No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, I will always come back to you." Kate stood perfectly still in the entrance hall for several minutes after the heavy palace doors closed behind William, her eyes fixed on the spot where he had last stood. The silence that filled the space was deafening, so different from the comfortable quiet she shared with William during their peaceful moments together. This was the silence of absence, of something precious being torn away, leaving only emptiness behind. She walked slowly to the tall window beside the entrance, her footsteps echoing in the vast hall with a loneliness she had never noticed before. Through the glass, she could see William's black car moving down the long palace driveway, growing smaller with each passing second. Kate pressed her palm against the cool window, watching until the car disappeared completely around the bend, taking her heart with it into the unknown. For exactly 5 minutes, Kate allowed herself to feel the full weight of her grief. She stood at that window and let the tears fall freely, each one carrying a piece of her fear and sadness. She cried for the empty bed she would sleep in tonight, for the breakfast conversations that would have one less voice, for the children who would ask every day when their father was coming home. She cried for herself, for the woman who would have to be strong enough for an entire family, while her own heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. But when those 5 minutes were over, Kate dried her tears and straightened her shoulders. She had 3 children upstairs who would need her to be their rock, their source of comfort and stability in a world that had suddenly become uncertain and frightening. She had royal duties to fulfill, appearances to make, and a public face to maintain, all while carrying the private burden of not knowing when or if her husband would return safely. Kate climbed the stairs to the children's bedrooms, her steps steady and purposeful despite the heaviness in her heart. She found Louis awake in his crib, babbling happily to his stuffed animals, blissfully unaware that his world had changed overnight. When he saw his mother, his face lit up with joy, and Kate felt a flutter of warmth in her chest. This innocent happiness was something she would need to protect and nurture, even in the midst of her own pain. George and Charlotte were still asleep, but Kate could see the worry even in their peaceful faces. Charlotte was clutching the family photograph that William had given her the night before, while George had fallen asleep with one of his father's books open beside him on the bed. Kate gently closed the book and straightened their blankets, whispering soft words of love and protection over her sleeping children. The days that followed William's departure established a new rhythm in the palace, one that Kate carefully constructed to provide stability and normalcy for her family. She maintained their usual breakfast routine, sitting in William's empty chair and filling the silence with cheerful chatter about the day's plans. She read extra bedtime stories and gave extra hugs, trying to pour enough love into her children to make up for their father's absence. Kate threw herself into her royal duties with renewed determination, understanding that staying busy would help keep the worst of her loneliness at bay. She attended charity events with a bright smile, gave speeches with confidence and grace, and met with important dignitaries as if her personal world had not been turned upside down. The public never saw the moments when she would step into a private room and take deep breaths to steady herself, or the nights when she would lie awake staring at William's empty pillow. Friends and family members marveled at Kate's strength during this difficult time, but she knew that what they saw as strength was actually love in action. Every meal she prepared for the children, every royal duty she fulfilled, every smile she managed to summon was an act of love for William and for the family they had built together. She was not just surviving his absence, she was honoring their partnership by being the best version of herself even when half of her heart was missing. In the quiet moments between her public appearances and family responsibilities, Kate would sit in their favorite chair by the window and write letters to William. She told him about the children's daily adventures, about George's progress in school, and Charlotte's new interest in painting. She wrote about Louis's first attempts at walking and the funny things he said that made her laugh despite her sadness. These letters became her lifeline, a way to stay connected to William even across the vast distance that separated them. Kate discovered that strength was not about not feeling pain, but about feeling it fully while still choosing to move forward. She allowed herself moments of grief and worry, but she did not let those moments define her days. Instead, she chose to focus on hope, on the belief that William would return, and on the knowledge that every day she remained strong was a day closer to their reunion. Approached with a careful smile and a cream-colored envelope bearing William's familiar handwriting, Kate's hands shook as she took the letter, her heart racing with a mixture of joy and anxiety. This was the first concrete proof that William was alive and thinking of them. Kate held the letter against her chest for a moment before opening it, feeling as if she were holding a piece of William himself. When she finally broke the wax seal, his words seemed to leap off the page. The children began to look forward to letter day as much as Christmas morning. Kate would gather them around her as she read aloud the parts meant for sharing, watching their faces light up as they heard their father's voice speaking to them across the miles. George began writing his own letters to include with Kate's, carefully printed messages about school and friends, and how much he missed their bedtime talks. Charlotte drew pictures to send along, colorful scenes of family life that she hoped would make her father smile. William's letters revealed glimpses of his daily life without giving away sensitive information about his mission. He wrote about the kindness of local people he had met, about beautiful sunsets he wished Kate could see, about moments when he felt their love reaching him across the distance. He described dreams he had about coming home, about the first meal Kate would cook for him, about holding his children again and hearing all their stories from the time he had been away. Sometimes William's letters contained small gifts, pressed flowers from the countryside where he was stationed, a smooth stone from a riverbank where he had sat thinking of home, a small sketch he had drawn of a bird that reminded him of the ones in their palace garden. These tiny tokens became treasures that Kate and the children kept in a special box, physical proof that their husband and father was thinking of them even in a faraway place. Kate's letters in return were filled with love and encouragement. She wrote about her faith in his mission and her pride in his service, but mostly she wrote about the ordinary moments that made up their family life. She sent photographs of the children, drawings they had made, and small mementos from home. A flower from their garden, a pebble from the path where they used to walk together, a piece of fabric from his favorite shirt that she had mended. Through these letters, Kate and William maintained their connection across time and space, proving that love could survive separation, and that words on paper could carry the weight of two hearts beating in rhythm despite the miles between them. 6 months had passed since William's departure, and Kate had learned to live in a world measured not by days or weeks, but by the space between letters and the rhythm of hope and waiting. The palace had settled into new patterns around his absence, but his presence remained everywhere. In the chair where he used to read his morning papers, in the garden where his roses bloomed more beautifully than ever, in the laughter of children who still saved their best stories to tell Papa when he came home. Kate had developed her own sacred morning ritual that kept her connected to William across the miles. Each day began in the same green velvet chair where she had first read the letter that changed their lives. Now that chair held a different kind of correspondence, William's letters from abroad, which she would reread while sipping her morning tea. The familiarity of this routine brought her comfort and strength, a way to begin each day by touching the invisible thread that still bound her heart to his. The children had grown and changed during William's absence in ways that would have amazed him. George had shot up several inches and developed a new maturity that reminded Kate achingly of his father. He had taken on the role of man of the house with a seriousness that was both touching and heartbreaking. Charlotte had become Kate's constant companion, seeming to understand instinctively when her mother needed extra hugs or silly jokes to brighten difficult days. Little Louis had learned to walk and talk, reaching milestones that William was missing, but that Kate carefully documented in photographs and letters. Each evening, Kate would sit with the children and tell them stories about their father. Not just memories from before he left, but new stories that she created about brave princes on important quests, about knights who traveled to distant lands to help people in need, about heroes who carried their family's love with them, like armor against all dangers. These stories served a double purpose. They kept William alive and present in their daily lives, while also helping the children understand that his absence was meaningful and necessary. Kate had learned to find joy in unexpected places during these months of separation. She discovered strength she never knew she possessed as she navigated royal duties alone, made difficult decisions about the children's education and activities, and managed the complex social obligations that came with her position. Each success felt like a gift she could offer to William when he returned, proof that she had not just survived his absence, but had grown stronger because of it. The letters from William had evolved over time, becoming richer and more detailed as he found ways to share his experiences without compromising the secrecy of his mission. He wrote about the resilience of people living in difficult circumstances, about small acts of kindness that restored his faith in humanity, about moments of natural beauty that reminded him there was still goodness in the world. Kate treasured these glimpses into his daily life, understanding that they represented his way of staying connected not just to her, but to his own humanity in what must be a very challenging environment. Friends and family continued to marvel at Kate's grace under pressure, but she knew that what sustained her was not extraordinary strength, but ordinary love multiplied by extraordinary circumstances. Every decision she made, every smile she summoned for public appearances, every patient answer to the children's repeated questions about when Papa would come home, all of it was powered by the deep certainty that their love was stronger than distance, stronger than time, stronger than fear. On particularly difficult days, when the loneliness threatened to overwhelm her, Kate would visit the places in the palace where she and William had shared their happiest moments. She would stand in their bedroom, where he had held her on that last morning, sit on the garden bench where they used to watch the children play, or walk through the halls where they had stolen quiet kisses between royal obligations. These pilgrimages to their shared history reminded her that their love story was not ending but simply paused, waiting for the next chapter to begin. Kate had also learned to recognize the signs of hope in their daily life. When George laughed at one of his father's favorite jokes, when Charlotte insisted on setting a place for Papa at the dinner table, even though he would not be there to fill it, when Louis pointed to William's photograph and said, "Papa, come home soon," with complete confidence. These moments reminded Kate that children had a wisdom about hope that adults sometimes forgot. The most powerful sustaining force in Kate's life was not just the hope that William would return, but the absolute certainty that their love had created something permanent and unbreakable. She carried him with her in every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of every day. And somewhere far away, she knew that William was carrying her in exactly the same way, that their connection transcended physical presence and existed in a realm where distance and time had no power. As she sat in her chair on this particular morning, reading his latest letter and watching the sun rise over their beloved garden, Kate felt the familiar flutter of hope in her chest. Today felt different somehow, charged with possibility. She could not have explained why, but something deep in her heart whispered that their separation was drawing to a close, that the long season of waiting was finally coming to an end, and that soon their quiet love story would have its joyful reunion.